How much can life throw at you as a man before you decide to give up? Do you have a breaking point where you just can't handle any more adversity? Or will you roll with the punches and use the cards that you've been dealt to become stronger? What's going on? Welcome to Alpha Dad Consulting. I am your host, G. Vidal, and on this show, we bring you tactics, strategies, resources, and conversations with incredible men to empower you as a dad to become that undeniable family leader your wife and kids want to follow. On this episode, I had the honor and privilege of interviewing one of my fellow Apogee brothers, Matt Konway. Matt is a family leader through and through who's faced a lot of adversity in his life from a young age, from being brought up in a broken home and ending up homeless to becoming a father and having to go through tough trials with his own son. There's so much to learn from Matt's story, and you're not going to want to miss what he shares towards the end about the mission and purpose he's on now that has the potential to help so many families. Let's go.
I can see the enemy approaching the battleground. Hear the drums pound like a thunder sound loud. I gather up my crowd to prepare them for what's coming. We've been summoned.
Mr. Matt Konway, how are you, sir?
I'm great, doing? Man. How are you?
Good, man. I'm excited to have you, bro. I was excited to connect with you. It's been real cool getting to know you really as you jumped into Apogee right now and just kind of starting to build this relationship with you. I know you're just in month one and you're going through the alter ego stuff and everything. So we've had some discussions around that, man. But today, I want to definitely just emphasize and focus on you, man, your life and your history, the experiences that you have, because I feel like you've lived a lot of lives and you've had a lot of experiences that I think are definitely going to be beneficial for the listeners, man. And it's just going to be able to serve as ways for them to extract lessons that are going to be able to help them as family men in their own lives.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to dive in, bro. So where I want to start with you, if it's cool, I want to start with you now, man. Matt Konway now. Who are you now? How would you describe yourself now? And what do the roles that you play right now in terms of you being a father, a husband, and even an entrepreneur, right? A provider. What do those roles look like for you right now?
It's a perplexing question for where I'm at now because I'm opening Apogee and I'm figuring out that portion of business to do for my son for his future. So using the experiences that I've taken that didn't work for me and trying to build a future for my son based on what I know in business and then combining that with the father that I want to be.
Your background, man. Let's talk about what life was like you growing up.
Sure.
Childhood, right? Like what was the home life like in the Konway home, brother?
Well, growing up, it wasn't the greatest. So I grew up just a little bit off 8 Mile. My mom suffered from some psychiatric stuff, and my dad was working 2 jobs to try to afford all the stuff we had going on. So my mom at home, she would run a daycare. So we had lots of kids in and out of the house, all different kids from the neighborhood. And so I grew up there. And then about I would say at 10, we moved.
Yeah.
And I'm also like, there's so many thoughts at one time that I'm thinking about, like the stuff that's happened in Detroit. Like, so my sister was kidnapped during that time. Like when I lived right there, like I went through a windshield when I lived down there. Like there was a lot of trauma that happened down there all at one time. And then we moved and all like that stuff had affected me moving into that new house. And then because my dad wanted us out of Detroit, because of all the stuff that was happening down there, he had to work even more. So he was home even less. And then my mom, she ended up feeling abandoned, feeling like no emotional ties to my father anymore because he was working so much as a provider. Mm-hmm. And then she ended up cheating. So she used my dad being at work as her reason for cheating. And then she used me to cover that up. So whenever we would go out or go do something or she would be with this guy, she would tell me to lie, and then she would give me toys for her lying for me not to tell my dad. And so that happened for a while. And so my dad started catching on to the differences of what was going on. And then so he started tapping the phones and he would follow my mom, and he ended up finding like the videos and everything that my mom was doing. And then my family was fractured. My dad left. And then from that point on, life got a little bit crazy. So I was homeless for a while because my mom had split from my dad and my dad became an alcoholic. And because that really damaged him pretty good during that time. And my mom took my sisters, and I was kind of left with an ultimatum to either go with my mom and sisters or to go with my dad. And my dad had, obviously spent all his time working or at the bar. And then you know, I didn't want to go with my mom because based on what she did kind of put me in the middle of all that mess, right? So like I had to make a choice as, you know, a young man to stay with my mom who just ruined the family or kind of go at it alone, lone wolf it. And so that's what I ended up doing. I just ended up, you know, staying alone because all of that hurt that my mom kind of put us through. And then it took me years, all the way till my 30s, to like understand, you know, what she went through for her to make those decisions, and then how it affected my dad, which still affects him today for sure, because he stayed single ever since that happened.
It's crazy, man, how that, like, that type of pain is you can ride that out for a long time if you don't work through it or figure out how to deal with that. You know what I mean? And it's
100%.
It's intense.
I think that's one of my biggest things that I take away right now from my dad. Like, you know, he's still trapped in all that pain, and he's never done anything about it as a man to fix that or let it go. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we can talk about today is, like, as a man, when you face that trauma, is getting the help you need wherever that may be. And it's not in the it's not outside of yourself. You know, it's not going to be in a drug or in a drink. It's going to be going to somebody, another man, a mentor, a coach, somebody that can help you talk through those things and walk through those things and kind of mirror yourself, right? Like, let you know where you're at. And then, you know, it holds you back. That pain doesn't just stop you emotionally. That holds you back in every facet of life, because I mean, the things you start to resort to and go to heal those wounds obviously play a role. I mean, when he drinks, he's not his best self the next day. When he drinks, he's not emotionally stable. When he drinks, he's not there for us. And, you know, this happened at 14. So, I mean, you're talking over 23 years now of being the same guy, never relieving that, you know, that stress, that trauma, all the stuff that's happened to him. So, you know, there's a part of me, when I was a boy, I used to resent him for that. And then as I became a man and had my own son, I realized, you know, what pain can do to you and what pain can do to your household and to your sons and to your kids, I should say, and to your wives. And I realized, like, everybody handles their stuff differently. And it's just whether or not you go outside of yourself to go get that fixed, you know, so that way you can be the best version, best dad, best lover you can be.
Yeah. There's something I want to touch on right there, man, because you see this a lot with men. I think also, especially with men in like the church community or the Christian community, right, where they put their wife on a pedestal, right? Like the wife becomes kind of like this purpose in life, or they're made to be the purpose of life, right? And then when something happens in a marriage similar to what you were describing with your dad and your mom, you know, that person falls off that pedestal, right? And then your whole world falls apart, bro. Like, because your purpose is gone. Like, you put your entire purpose on a person rather than something that's within you that you're doing or working towards, right? And it's such a different thing. And you see the effects of that, right? So I don't know, man. I was just thinking about that as you were describing that, you know, the pain that your dad was going through. And man, like, guys, if you guys are paying attention, like, that's a powerful thing. Like, if you're looking at your wife right now, and even, I would even say even your kids, and you're saying like your wife and your kids are your purpose in life, I think that might be a way where you can falter as a leader, right? Because if you're putting that, they're not going to live up to that. Keep in mind that these are flawed individuals just like us, man. You know, so when in my life, when I made my wife my purpose and put her on a pedestal, and she made a mistake and she fell off of that, it ruined my world. And I had to come back from that, right? And save our marriage and do all that whole thing. So there's your purpose. And this is something that Bedros Koulian said on one of our most recent mentor calls within Apogee. He said that a purpose is not something, it's not an object to be found, right? But rather something that needs to be developed. And I think that's very, very powerful, because the second we put somebody on a pedestal and make somebody the purpose, they're going to falter, man. Like, that's too much to live up to. Rather, find a purpose, develop a purpose, right, in life, like Matt has, and he's going to get into that in just a little bit here in terms of what he's doing, because he's doing some awesome stuff right now. And find a purpose like that, and then bring your wife and your kids along. They become part of that purpose, and they ride with you to accomplish that, right? You lead them through that. They're inspired through that. But when you make them the purpose, you know, your kids are going to grow up and they're going to go have their own families. They're not going to be in the home forever. You know what I mean? So they're going to develop their own purposes in life and their own drive, their own thing. So guys, pay attention to that. Don't make your wife and your kids the purpose in life. They're part of it. You know,
you hit the nail on the head, brother. Like, I mean, you couldn't be more perfect, because we grew up Pentecostal. So I know you didn't know this about me, but we grew up highly religious. I mean, extremely religious, like dancing in the pews, speaking tongues, like laying people out, like Benny Hinn religious. So in my family, that's exactly how it was. And, you know, it was weird because during that time, my dad, you know, from 1 to about 8 or 9, my dad was in church every Sunday, men's group at the house on Fridays, Wednesday night men's fellowship. So there was like definitely everyone in my family from top to bottom was just religion, or outcast. And so, and we can get into later how that affected me now as a man and what I've like had to unravel and then, you know, re-put together, because a lot of people end up saying that, you know, they tie that to God and then they break their relationship completely, because essentially man had broken that, right? Man being your fellow man, your family, your dad, your whatever. They constructed something that maybe they constructed wrong, and now you're running with it. And now your beliefs have suddenly become tied to what their beliefs were, instead of it being, you know, the right values, the right way. So if they built you on a wrong foundation, suddenly that becomes your foundation. So that's what I had to rebuild as a religious man, you would say, or a man that believes in God. I pull religion out of it, right? So I believe God, I believe the Bible, I believe Jesus, I believe these things that are my core foundation and values, but I don't have to take the way that they did it or the way that they may have done it incorrectly.
Yeah.
Which for me, I felt was very judgmental. You know, when I was growing up, I always felt like, man, if I stepped on the wrong crack, the whole church turned their head. So it was like this very judgment-based thing instead of this loving atmosphere where I could fail, and I was loved even more for failing. And that's what would show me God's light. And I just say that to say, like, that's what did the most trauma for me, was the thought or idea that you had to be perfect. Otherwise, God was going to hate you. Otherwise, man was going to hate you. Otherwise, you were basically, you know, this goes to the tribalism aspect of it. You were kicked out of your tribe for messing up, as opposed to embraced and shown love during that time. And then that plays into being a dad, because you have to learn how to love your son when he messes up. You got to learn the right way to be a man and be calm and be inviting to when he messes up. I was just having this conversation with my son the other day. You know, I think we were leaving Sam's Club, and him and his stepmom were having a discussion. He got real emotional, and I could tell it was over nothing. But he took something she said very personal. And so I took that moment to just embrace him and let him know, hey, you can feel this way. That's okay. But we're still going to love you. And you got to understand where this was coming from and break down those walls that he was already putting up at 10 years old, that if I didn't handle the right way, he could build forever. So like, we're, as dads, we get these moments of opportunity where we can like deconstruct or construct, right? So you got to know those moments of like, here's an opportunity that I'm 10 years, 20 years from down the line, he's going to do with his kids. Or we can look at it and just go like, in the moment, I'm going to let my emotions take over how I was raised, and I'm going to build this wall where, you know, he's not going to be able to grow later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dude, let's talk about that skill, bro, because that skill as a family leader, right? Because the example that you pose right now with your son, you had to be self-aware. You had to be aware of that. Like, you had to be aware of his emotions. You had to look at his, you know, body language and assess, you know, how he was receiving these things, and then decide to intercede and say, hey, I need to step in here as a leader and talk to him and, you know, show him what's going on. You know, like, dude, that in itself, just having the awareness to be that locked in with your kids is a skill. You know, and there's something that I've noticed about you, even just in the short time that we've talked and gotten to know each other, is that you have kind of this innate ability, bro, to just get along with pretty much everybody. Yeah, like, you can get along pretty quickly with anybody. And you also have this innate ability to read people, like to read their emotions, to read how they're feeling, how they're perceiving things, and you know kind of what to say and all. So let's talk about the development of that skill, bro, because that's something that it doesn't come easy for a lot of men.
Sure. So I'll try to hit on all the facets, because this started really young and then it branched out, and it's all from trauma. So the first little bit was my parents would literally fisticuffs in the middle of the living room. My mom would claw my dad's face. She would have these psychiatric breaks, and my dad would try to hold her down, and she would be screaming and fighting and scratching his face. And as a boy, I would hide. So I would hide behind this like little corner end table, if you would. Like we had these big, heavy end tables. 20 years ago, they weren't nice like they were now. They're these huge, bulky things. So you could literally hide behind them. And so I was hiding behind one, and I would watch everything that was going on. So I was watching non-verbals, I was watching verbals, I was watching hand movements, how those things, how everything psychological was playing out. Do you know what I'm saying? And then as I grew and I started, doing stuff in the street and the things that were going on, I listened a lot. I watched a lot. I watched mannerisms. I watched how people perceive things. I watched the tone. I started just watching, listening all the time. Even though I talk a lot, I'm very outgoing, I'm still listening. I'm calculating. Everything I'm doing is calculating. And so speed things up a little bit. My son's born in 2013. He's vaccine injured. That's a political discussion, but he's vaccine injured, and he starts having seizures. And so the doctor tells us, they don't think he's going to ever talk, and that he might have other problems and other medical stuff to deal with as he goes. And as a dad, you're like, in your head, you're like, I'm going to raise the football player. I'm going to raise the basketball player. I'm going to do all the things that my parents did wrong. I'm going to fix all these wrongs and these injustices. And then this kid's born, and you're like, oh, wait, what? And you got to adjust instantly in that moment. So you take, I took it this way. I took a moment to mourn what I thought, right? The expectations, the imaginations, the dream. And then I had to say, I need a new dream. I need to rebuild this dream for exactly who he is and what he wants to be, and just help him be the best, no matter which way this goes. I can't expect him to run if he can't run. I can't expect him to talk if he never talks, but I can expect myself to love him with everything I got, just like I did in the beginning. And so he becomes 1, he becomes 2, he becomes 3. We're going through all the stuff that we had going on. He gets diagnosed with a brain tumor around 1 year old. And so again, it's beating the steering wheel, it's talking to God, it's wondering, it's asking questions. And then it's going, hey, you got to start learning sign language. Your son can't talk. So it's watching those mannerisms. He's talking to me. He's just talking to me different. He's talking to me. He's saying, we'd be in Kmart or Walmart or, the mall, and he'd be talking to me, and people would be like, they'd be looking at him. What are you saying? And we'd be talking. It wasn't sign language like you would see, real sign language at a concert or a show or, a speech. It was literally our own sign language. Yeah. So I could understand everything he was saying. And it was about, I had to be so present every minute of the day to understand that I couldn't take my eyes off of him. So if he was doing something and I just heard him moan a certain way, I knew he was asking for a drink. He wasn't hurting him, whatever he was doing. I knew he was asking for something, and I could just get it. And it became this intuition where it's like, and that was just to my son. We had that, but I can do that with everyone, because all you got to do is just, you change the setting, but it's still the same operating system, right? Whether you're using Google or Bing, it's the same search engine. So it's like the same thing with my son was, I just take that, and you can do it all across the board with pretty much anybody if you just stop, listen, and get to know them. Besides thinking of yourself so much, the impact that you're making, what the things you're saying, your mannerisms, you're just paying closer attention to them.
No, I like that, dude. Because that's exactly that's exactly how you start learning your kids, man. And you start paying attention and becoming observant with their, like you said, their mannerisms and how they operate, how they perceive the world and all that. And it's just real cool to see that you're doing that and that you have a bond with your son that way, despite the challenges, right?
Yeah, it's interesting too. Sorry to interrupt. This is clicking to me now. We're like rolling. Is his stepmom and I we talk about this a lot. Is it's hard for me as a man to see other people not have those abilities, because I don't think of them as gifts. I think of them as just like something you develop by doing. And so, like, you should do it too. You should do it. You expect that. And so it's something as a man I have to, like, not expect in my relationship, because I can't, just like you said earlier, you can't expect the person you're with or the people around you to have the same, downloads that you've had, the education you've had through life. You have to be able to, set yourself apart and be patient with those things when you invite somebody else in your home to be a part of your family too. So with this situation that we had with my son, it was a good bonding experience, because I was able to pull her aside and talk to her about what I saw, so I could show her what to look for next time. And now we sat in his room and he cried it out and gave her a hug. And that was a good experience where he got a chance to grow closer to her by something that she had not seen that he expected too. So he's learning that his expectations can't be someone's going to know my feelings just because they're in my life. I have to talk about those things, which even though he has struggle talking, he's got to come out of his shell to be able to talk about that. Yeah. So like even at 10 right now, he's learning that those expectations aren't going to be realistic, where like I didn't get that till way later. So already I feel positive because he's catching on something early on, right? And that's what we want as a dad or as a mentor, is to teach people to catch on way faster, because that's the advancement that they're going to get from our legacy, is being able to catch up faster than we did, right? If we're learning at 30 and 40 and they're learning at 20, man, the advantage they have. I mean, think about that.
For sure, bro. Yeah. Huge leg up, man.
Yeah. Sorry for being long-winded there. I was just thinking about that moment.
Nah, you're good, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. So, dude, talk to me about that, man. Like you learn about the challenges that your son's going to have to face, right? And there's, the initial thing for, like, let's talk to the dad that maybe just found out something like that, right? Sure. Whether, the kid has, special needs, or there's like autism involved, or, whatever thing is involved, or they've been like vaccine injured, like your son was, where they find out that there was these chemicals and stuff in the stuff that they're putting in, and then that had an effect on it, which I believe too. I'm with you there. Like, I think that's an actual thing. Yeah. So,
it's proven.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, for sure.
They call it an allergic reaction, but it's proven.
Yeah. No, it's proven. It's for sure. Yeah. Like, there's talk about trust the science all day, and yeah, like it's there, man. Like,
right.
So talk to me about the mindset, man, that you had to go through, because I'm sure, like, the initial push, especially for anybody that grows up religious or, in the Christian world, is to blame God. Is to say, like, why me, God? Why this, right? So let's talk to that man that's maybe having that conversation right now, man. And how do you navigate through that?
Sure. I'm taking myself back to that moment. And there's plenty of moments since then, right? Because when something like that happens, it's not a one-time thing. They don't just say, oh, this is it, and then you go home and you're good. It's appointment after appointment. It's meeting after meeting. It's, neurological visit after neurological visit. It's ups, downs, highs, lows, everything in between. So I would say that I would be lying if I said, oh, I got upset the first time and I was good. I mean, there's times now, like, like I said, this weekend where, it gets to him and I say, why? I wish it wasn't this hard, but I'm glad that I'm handling it. I'm glad that I have it on me, because I'm going to be able to, that he's not having any other dad in this position, if you would, right? So I look at it like the book of Job. And I don't know how many people are familiar with the book of Job, but my man lost his whole family. And he got surrounded by some bad friends who were telling him he did wrong, he did this, he did that. And he was mad at God. He flipped out on God, but he still managed to keep the relationship. So me and G can be worse like at each other's throats, but at the end, I got your back. So I may be to your face, me and you may be heated, but if something pops off, I got you. And that's the way I look at it with God my whole life. I was homeless before. I've had a lot of stuff happen to me in my life. And at the end of the day, I think what I learned was, separate from religion is my relationship is like, he's just my best friend. And I'm allowed to be mad at my best friend. And ultimately, I don't know, since I'm not all knowing, I don't know what the plan is. I just know that this is what's set forth in me. So I got to believe, if I'm really close to my best friend, I got to believe he's got my best interest at hand. And so if his best or my best interest is for him to have me go through these things, then the more I believe and trust in that, the easier those things become. Because why would I care about the storm if the storm is for me, if it's going to help my grass grow? Why would I care about, whatever the tribulation is? Ultimately, I should be laughing. I should be happy. Let it, what's Jocko's? Good. Let it rain harder. Good. Make the storms worse. Good. I've had flat tires, plasmas fall off the screen. I've had kids sick, all of it in one day. And it's just, okay, I see you. Good. And eventually the stuff becomes so bad, the storms become so bad, you have no choice but to laugh, right? It's like being ultimately humbled, where you fall to your knees. You realize that you can't turn inward. You can't turn outward. You have to turn upward. That's it. So when I experienced those times, man, I just beat the steering wheel. I yelled at God. I was mad. I cried it out. And guess what? I got out of my car. I wiped off my face. I walked into those children's rooms at Beaumont. And I was a man smiling on my face, telling my son, look, we're walking out of here, best friends. We're walking out of here, father and son. You're going to do fine. Don't worry about it. God's got you. I got you. And that walking in that way, giving him that confidence, whether or not I believe it in that moment, he believes it because he sees it in my eyes as his dad, that I'm instilling this in him. So when he's going into surgery, he's holding my hand. All he's worried about is, hey, I just want to make sure I'm falling asleep without stress and anxiety. I'm not going to amp him up and get him all stressed out before going in or be crying myself, because if I'm doing that, he's going to do that. Yeah. So I got to bring that ultimate dad energy. And I think, with what you do, man, this is so important, is for guys to know that you're allowed to have all these feelings. You're allowed to cry it out. You're allowed to swear. You're allowed to get mad. There is a time and a place. And it's not in the middle of war. In the middle of war, when the storm is coming and your kid's laying in that bed and he's holding your hand, he's about to go into brain surgery, or he's about to get put down to get a test, or whatever it may be, that's not the time. So when he goes to sleep and I got 8 hours to go to the parking lot, that's the time. When his mom needs to hold me or give me a hug, despite all the enemies we were going into it, she's going to get a hug from a man. No tears, no nothing. She's going to get a man confident. She's going to get a man that our son's going to be fine. She's going to get a man that cares about her, regardless of all the stuff she said about him all these years, no matter what. Because my job as a man is to put that in my backpack and carry it, and that's fine. And when the time comes, then I can sit it down. When I'm alone, when I'm going through it, when I'm with my man G, when I'm in a men's group, whatever it may be, a church, there's a time and place that I can release all that baggage. And that's what's important for men to know, is like, don't carry that backpack alone. Let it out at the right time, at the right place, whatever you do. But don't try to handle that alone, because it ends up, it'll tear up every other facet of your life if you try to do that alone. For real.
Yeah, I love that, dude. Yeah, I love that. Showing strength and where it needs to be, right? And the environment that it needs to be there. And then not necessarily weakness, but vulnerability, and kind of wrestling with the emotions, right? Because we have to do that. And there's so many of us that try to be really stoic and try to not even go to an emotional place or anything. Maybe it's not a natural thing for us to do, Yeah, exactly. Or we feel like we feel like we're going to be weak or show a sign of weakness if we go there, right? And I think it's necessary, man. It's just necessary in the right type of environments, like you were saying, right? It's necessary to do it somewhere else. You wrestle with that. You wrestle with the demon or whatever you got to work out, and then you come back and show up how you need to, right?
And I think that leads into making sure that you have a good circle, man. If you're with the wrong guys, even if it's not your family, if it's not your friends, one thing that I did very poorly in life that I wish I didn't, and for all your viewers and everyone out there, is like, find a circle. If you don't have it at home, find it somewhere else. If you don't have it with your friend group, make new friends. If you don't have it there, get help at church. But create a friend group that you can text in these times, that you can, someone's going to uplift you. Man, if I had the friend group I have now through Apogee and through you and through the gentleman that I know now, I couldn't imagine how much further along I would be, how much less emotional damage I would have. There's so much stuff that I wish I had a team for that just would uplift me. And it doesn't even matter if they're there physically. Just knowing, the other day I walked into a meeting and Chase texted me, and it just was uplifting. It gave me a little boost, confidence that I knew I had someone there in my corner. And it felt good that if I failed, I could just talk about my failures with somebody. Because, man, when my son was going in to get his first brain scan, it was an overnight brain scan. I'll never forget this. And I went out to the parking lot, and I had just carried all that baggage, right? So I'm with all the smokers that are literally out there, and their sons and daughters are going through the worst things imaginable. I see these kids every week. It's so hard, man. They got trachs and they got all this stuff. They can barely walk. And you just hear the people complaining about the stupidest stuff. And it's just I want to bring them to these places, right? But I'm out there, and I'm just in a ball of tears. And I sit down, my peripheral, emotional backpack, if you would. And I go to my phone. And there's no one to text. I don't want to text. My grandparents are all gone. My uncles are gone. And everyone else is just going to kind of make light of it, right? That's the way they handle when a guy shares another emotion with the wrong crowd, they joke about it. And there's a time and place for that too. Don't get me wrong. I love ribbing. I'm the best at it. I love it. I love comedy. But there's some times as a man where you got to know when another man's breaking, and you got to be his backbone. And it's like I looked in my phone and it almost doubled down on the damage because I just wanted one person to go, bro, I will come pray with you. I will come there right now. I'll be in the parking lot. Like if anything happens up there, you come down and be there. I'll be there with you. And I was like so saddened by that I'm like, man, this is 9 years ago now. And, going to that, being there, and you just scroll through and you go, I have no one to text. I have no one to call that can be. So if you can do that, fix that now. Start developing and strengthening those relationships that you have, because you never know when you're going to need them. I didn't know I would need this. I thought I was just going to have a perfectly normal, healthy, happy son. I never thought about it like that. So yeah, that's definitely some advice I would give is change your circle, make really strong friends. And it's okay to have the ones that rib and joke, but find the ones that you can always count on no matter what.
Yeah. I saw something, I think it was on Instagram or somebody was talking about, a 6 p.m. friend versus a 3 a.m. friend.
Ooh, I like that.
And he's just saying you need more 3 a.m. friends, right? Like the guys that you can call at 3 a.m. and you know that they're going to be there for you, as opposed to the 6 p.m.
The Town or whatever, where he says, we got to go bury somebody or something like that. And I forget what he says, but then he's like, all right, well, where are we going? Like he doesn't question nothing.
He doesn't question anything. He just
gets right in. And I love that. I was like, that's what you want.
That's that loyalty, that brotherhood, man. It's powerful, bro. It's powerful.
That's one thing I love about Apogee Strong and what you got going on, man. The more we can make of that, the more communities we make within our cities, our states, our world, man. I think it will start to change men in general to be more emotionally vulnerable. And if they're not carrying in that, they're less full of hate and they're more full of love and they're more full of understanding and empathy. And the more they can do that, the better they are with kids and their wives. So it's such a trickle down effect. And it's funny because I relate to this movie that's kind of cornball, but everyone jokes about Avatar. But it's literally that tree of life, bro. It's just like that. Everything is connected. It sounds really corny, kind of weak, but like as an analogy, that tree touches everything, right? Like at the end of the day, one thing dies, the whole tree feels it. And it's just like that for men. It's like if you have something broken in your life, it's going to trickle through your kids, to your wife, to your job, in one facet or another, whether it's, being short-tempered, whether it's being late all the time, whether it's being sick, even if you want to go to not fully performing your best, at some level, you're not your best when you have damage. Just get it fixed.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, actually. Yeah, bro. The brotherhood thing, what I do want to mention is like, man, joining Apogee, right? For me, it was over a year ago now. It's crazy. And
jealous.
Like I didn't. You're gonna get there, bro. It'll come fast. Trust me. But I had, I was alone too, man. Like I felt that lone wolf, and I had a lone wolf mentality. Like I'll figure things out on my own. I just figure it out, and I had maybe a small handful of friends, like the rib-on friends, right? Like the ones that we grow up with, the guys from the hood that you just know, you guys have all these histories and stories and all that stuff. And that's all great. Like, I love that. They're still in my life and all that, but there's a difference that occurs when you get next to and get in a room with men that are kind of on their purpose, right? That men that are real leaders, man. And like they take their leadership seriously. And that they're trying to improve themselves in every facet of life, like you were talking about, every area of life, so that trickle-down effect doesn't occur, right? And when you get around these men, whether it's in a virtual setting like we're doing right now, or calling, texting, whatever it is, however you bring them, or joining a community like we did with Apogee, like just getting in that room in some form or another is going to change you, is going to help you level up. And right now, a year into Apogee, guys, like I'm telling you, I have at least, like what Matt was talking about, looking through your phone and not knowing who you can contact. That dynamic I didn't have that exact same scenario, of course, but I had that same thing. Like I didn't have anybody to contact, except for my friends who we could just joke on, right? But anybody serious, that 3 a.m. friend, now I have like over 100 that I can call. You know what I mean? Like, think about that. Think about how powerful that is. I have like a couple dudes almost in every state that I can hit up if something goes down or something, and they will have my back, And the crazy part is that we've established this relationship, this brotherhood, if you will, so quickly in a matter of 12 months because we align on these core principles. We align on a code. We align a code that we live by. We align on our values, man, like what we actually value. We may not believe the same thing. Maybe we have a relationship with God that's a little different, than most. Maybe some are more religious than others. Whatever that looks like, at the end of the day, the brotherhood that we have in Apogee, living by that code and all that, is what unites us. And the mission that we're on just becoming better men, is what unites us. And it forces us, or not forces us, but it gives us the ability to create an environment, a culture where we all feel like we belong, And there's so much power in that, guys. Like, you definitely plug yourself into a brotherhood, whether it's Apogee, whether it's mine through Alpha Dad, or whatever it is. Like, plug yourself into a brotherhood. Find somebody that's running something that you can relate to, that you vibe with, and join, man. Like, get yourself a good set of solid men around you, and you're gonna trip out how quickly your life changes if you come correct, right? In the terms of like, hey, I'm not here just to take, but I'm here to give. And you'll be rewarded so much more. Like, it's just an amazing thing.
And you hit on that too. You like, giving allows you to see introspectively as well. So the more that you talk about your own story to other people, that you've gone through stuff, it allows you to see it and almost heal from the stuff that you've gone through, because you realize, once again, you're putting that pain to practice, or the experience that you've gone through to practice, and now you're building someone else up, and you're feeding off that. It allows you to grow again, because you're like, okay, now I'm using this as a tool, not only for the stuff that I've gone through, but also to help that person build.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, there's no price on that, for sure. That's the most valuable thing. Those experiences that you're passing along, for sure, that purpose.
Yeah, man. Adding value to other people's lives, bro. Value. Like, that's and perfect. Just having that servant heart, right? Like, to be able to serve others without expecting anything in return, because that's the key, right? There's a lot of people that will serve others with the malintent, or like the expectation that, okay, well, if I do this for this dude, like, he's gonna owe me a favor, right? So then I can call him, and like, dude, that's not a good way to think. Just serve, man. Just give, and then you'll be rewarded tenfold. Like, you'll be rewarded at the times when you're not even looking for it, and you're like, what, dude? Like, dude, that it's a game changer. But come with that type of attitude. Come with that servant heart, for sure.
I love that.
Yeah, bro. I wanna dive into. So we got about 10, 15 minutes or so. I want to make sure that I respect your time as well.
Oh, you're good.
And I want to dive into the mission you're on now, bro, because right now you're undertaking something that's huge. Like, it's big, and it's going to change a lot of people's lives.
Worried about a second.
And, dude, yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's big, and I mean, it's just another thing that you can conquer. And you've been in the entrepreneurship game for quite some time. Like, you've built companies, you've done that, but talk about where you were, like the industries that you were in versus what you're getting into now, and where that is, how that mission has come about for you, right? Like, how have you become compelled to jump into this type of entrepreneurial venture, I should say?
Sure. So the venture you're discussing is Apogee, Oakland County. It's a campus that we're doing. There's about 50 of them throughout the country right now. And initially, I owned remodeling construction companies. So that's what I've always been a part of, is building those companies out. I started being in that type of industry when I was really young. I got my first hernia at 11, roofing pole barns with my grandfather. So I got my second by 15, tearing it again. So like roofing, remodeling, bathrooms, hands-on, all that stuff was the industry I came up in. And I realized that those guys would break their backs, but they were all broke. So I was like, how can I leverage my experience, but then turn that into something financial where I can still run around with my kids and play without having nubby fingers and a broken back? And that was just, using my business acumen and my school experience to turn those into businesses. So that's what I did. And then also it allowed me to be successful because I could relate to people because I had done it, right? So I didn't care if I was hiring you on as a janitor, as an apprentice, as a call center rep. I had just as much respect for you as I did myself. And I actually wanted you to make more than I did so it would rise your family up, because that's where my pleasure came from, was knowing like, hey, I started you out at $11 an hour. Now you're making 40 and you got a brand new house and a brand new car and a new kid. And like, I was watching that whole thing transpire in front of me, and that gave me like enough joy. It paid off besides anything financial. So that's the first part. COVID hit. So we're going to go full circle here. So COVID hit, and during that time I was homeschooling my kids. Obviously, I think a lot of people were, but I didn't want to take it for granted. I really wanted to see what was going on. I think it opened up a lot of parents' eyes, honestly, because they're like, man, this is what teachers go through. This is what they don't do. This is what they do. This is what my kid is actually learning or not learning. And I knew all that because I obviously paid acutely attention to it based on my son's health issues. But when he was home, I wanted to gamify everything, because honestly, I couldn't sit at the table and do bookwork. Like it's just not who I was. I mean, I grew up in the public school system in Detroit, and this is how old I am. Teachers could hit kids. So I would get smacked in the back of the head. I'd get the mollywop from a ruler. I'd get calmed down. And most of the time I spent more time out in the hall than I did in the school, honestly. So we'll fast forward to when I'm doing my son. I'm like, I don't want to make him go through what I went through, because I'm miserable as an adult. I'm sitting at a table doing bookwork. So, I started doing little fun stuff, like I would hide money all over the house, which would also take up a significant amount of time for him to find it, right? So it earned me a little bit of time as a parent to just be free. But I would put money around the house and say, when you get to $5, you can stop. So he was learning financial basis. Like I found 25 cents. So he'd come to me and he'd ask me, is this a dime? Is this a quarter? So he was learning what everything was while he found it. And so he was assimilating, okay, this is a dime, this is 10, this is a quarter, this is 25. Put them together, it's 35. And this wasn't out of a book. This was just gamifying stuff. When we did science, we'd go, we got a big nature center by us. We'd go out there and I would tell him, flip over all the logs, find all the crickets, find all the mealworms, find the salamanders. And it would allow me, one, I could work, but I could enjoy him. I was taking in memories and he was learning. So it was like, I was compounding everything in life at once. And then when he went back to school, it was almost like a part of me died. I was like, it wasn't like I had all this free time. I wasn't one of those parents on Facebook like, yay, my kid's gone. I was like, man, I wish I could make more memories with my dude. Like, I wonder what he's doing right now. And like, I knew what he was doing. He was sitting at a desk. And I was like, I bet you he's just probably sitting there like waiting for recess, waiting for gym. And so I'd go pick him up from school and I'd literally say, I had two rules. Who'd you help today and what'd you learn today?
Oh, that's cool.
And both times he would tell me recess or gym, and he would tell me something weak, like, oh, I gave someone a napkin. So I'm like, all right, we need to work on this part for sure. Like we need to do a little more things there. But I started thinking about this. So I started Googling homeschooling. And I was trying to figure out if I could run a business and homeschool at the same time, because then you're talking, you'd have to work nights and figure that whole thing out. Yeah. And I came across Apogee Cedar Park. And so I started doing some research and I started seeing what their kids were like, and, Tim Kennedy and Matt Boudreau. And I started diving in a little bit deeper. And I started sending some emails, and I sent, I don't know, I guess an email a month for 6 months, and I got no response. So I'm like, oh man, this is brutal. I'm like, at least somebody. So then I started calling the phone. I got no response. So I'm like, man, I got to keep attacking this. So he's still going to school at this time. And a few months down the line, I'm running my commercial glass company. I get an email, interested in opening up an Apogee location. And I said, this is it. I just lit up inside. I said, wow, all right, I told God, you didn't close the door. The door's open. Yeah. If this is what you want me to do. And then I did my entry interview, and they said, there's over 600 applicants or 500 applicants. And I said, all right, God, well, if this is the route you want to take, like this is in your hands. If you don't want it, then I know I have to spend more time building my company. And if you do want it, then I know this is the direction I'm going to take. It's in your hands, right? Whatever you want to do with it. And so another 60 days almost went by, and they said, you've been accepted. So I was like, all right, that's that. So I stopped doing the commercial glass for the time being and focused on building out a Apogee campus here in Oakland County, Michigan. And we're rolling with that. We're shooting for doors open by September 1st, walkthroughs in August. And God willing, everything will pan out. We'll get some great kids in there that we can raise up into educated heroes that are going to change the world. That's the goal.
That's awesome, man. I love that. What can you share about how Apogee schools differ from a public school?
Well, Well, it's night and day. I just had this conversation with Sean Briscoe, this is an incredible man, last night. Yeah, he's an awesome guy. And it's the difference is you're not teaching the child what you want them to memorize. You're allowing them to find who they are and then be educated by what they want to learn. So you're still learning all the core academics that they need to know, but you're learning what the application to life is. You're not telling them what to think. You're teaching them that they can think, how to think. So it's allowing them to deconstruct. If you ever seen, you got kids. So if you ever sit back on your couch, one of my funnest things to do is watch my son play. I love to mute the TV and listen to him make up noises and make up voices. And he'll talk his different characters. And he'll start building things with connects and then connect Legos to him. And I can see his brain, these synapses firing up, and he's creating all these things. And it's like, that's what a kid should be doing. When you see that, my son's 10. If he can go to school and sit at a desk like that, and then he can come home and be that guy in front of me, in front of the ottoman doing these things, why can't he be like that all the time and still learn? There's no reason why he couldn't. There's no reason why I can't send him in the backyard or at a nature center and have him learn just as much, if not more, in science. Out in the real world application, learning these things and catching a fire for them. I have such an admiration for nature. And I talk about this with people online all the time. I'm a hunter. I love to hunt. My grandfather raised me hunting. I got my first 12 gauge at 12 years old. I got my first compound bow, and I wasn't allowed to use my gun until I learned how to shoot and kill a deer. So I didn't even get to use my gun for 6.5 years because I didn't get my first deer until 18 after he had passed. And I kept that promise after he passed. So I have a love for nature and admiration for nature because of, not from school. They didn't teach me deer are beautiful and sit me in front of a Disney show and I got lit up. I spent time with nature. The deer that were hurt, we took in from the DNR and put a bell around them, and we fixed their arms and legs because we loved them. We were out there doing it. I learned about construction and built businesses off construction because I tried it. I did it. I failed, and then I succeeded. I learned from my failures. With kids, what are they failing at? When you give them an F, you're telling them you failed memorizing what we told you to learn or what we told you was learning. It could be anything. My son brought home a homework sheet the other day, and it was a gallon of milk and a couple liters and a couple cups. And I almost had to laugh at myself because I said, I don't even know how many liters are in a cup of gallon. I'm looking at the table on the top, and I'm like, yo, I have never learned. I know I learned this. I don't know what grade, but I'm like, this is wild because who has ever asked me that? Now, I tell you what, during COVID, I cooked a lot. I love to cook. But I also learned about cooking by being in the kitchen. No one gave me a homework sheet and told me, Matt, there's 4 liters in this gallon, so if you get this recipe, no, I did it. I fell in love with cooking by doing it. So why couldn't I have your son or daughter right next to me in a kitchen making an egg, and you learn, bam, you crack open the egg. Oh, you're drawing an emotional tie to the chicken, the egg. This is where my food comes from. I don't want to waste it because I just saw this chicken do all this work to make it. Oh, look, I'm going to put in some milk because this is what makes, the egg scrambled and soft. Now they're making all these connections. And you want to talk about appreciation for your food, appreciation for your life, appreciation for all these things. It's by doing. And what I want to say most importantly is connection. There's to people, to life, to all things. I get goosebumps talking about it. It's all about that connection. That connection equals energy, man. Everything is built off energy. Atoms come together based on energy, and it's all about that and then they connect, right? That's what life is that connection. Tim is a ball of fire because he's always full of energy because he's connected to everything he does. Now, if I told him to come sit down and do accounting, he would lose his mind if he could even keep it. So you're taking something and somebody and you're asking them to do something that is against their nature day in and day out. And then you're going, well, why didn't you learn this? F. Now feel like crap because you didn't want to learn this. F. Now get made fun of by your peers because you're not keeping up with them. F. I just can't fit. Once this got brought to my light, it all started connecting that my son is behind in speech, but he's behind in everything else. Because they don't allow him to expand on all the stuff he's passionate about. So what if he was passionate about soccer and he wanted to read about soccer, but he has to read about history? But if he read about soccer, he could catch up in reading. You see what I'm saying? Yep. This goes for all the kids. You just have to flip that on its head. And I just wish that we could do that I see the system is changing a little bit, but we're not even going to be a part of the system. We're going to revolutionize this whole game. I love it. I'm amped up about it, man.
That's awesome, bro. I love it. Yeah, I'm behind you 100%, man. That's awesome. Yeah, that's what we need. We need.
And another thing I want to add to that is it's a community. So your kid's not a solo, isn't in, 200, 300, 400 person school. They're in a community of people, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, that they can be real with. They can talk about their feelings. They can have real relationships with. And the dividends that's going to pay as far as legacy is concerned. I mean, as a parent, right, you save up, you try to get all this money together for their college, and you make these wills and trusts to pass down all these things. But if you don't pass your real legacy, who you are with your values, your character, who your family is, your family lineage used to mean something back in the day. When you don't pass those morals and those rights along to that kid, what does it matter what you leave them? Yeah. If they're going to, you're seeing this huge rift right now between parents and families because they ship their kids off to school and then they ship them into a sport or some after school curriculum or activity. And then they get them for 1 hour to feed them and shower them and put them to bed. And there's no values being passed. There's no connection to their family. There's no reason for them to care about 100, 200 grand, 300 grand, a house you left them, a car you left them. Why would they care about it? They're not connected to it. The only way that, your kids end up valuing what you leave to them is by literally passing along those values, setting that standard, that code, the religion practices that you preach inside your household that benefit the family, that have been passed along for all these years, and tweaking the mistakes they made to allow those kids to flourish from, like we talk about, a seed or a sprout into a massive tree. I mean, that's the only way they're going to. I wanted my grandpa's lazy boy. My grandfather's lazy boy. Run down, piece of junk. I mean, sat in that thing for 40 years, right? And it was just, people would look at this thing and say, I wouldn't even let this go into a thrift store or sit on the side of the road. And I wanted that thing because that lazy boy was a memory of every morning at 5 a.m. on the farm. My grandfather would rock me for 30 minutes before we went to work. And like that thing, I could put it in a glass chamber and I would bring it to every house because I was so connected to that lazy boy. That memory, I could smell it. I could smell my grandfather just thinking about it. And if you can make those connections so strong, no matter what you leave, those things that you teach them, they'll appreciate tenfold. When you're cooking with your kid, they'll remember cooking with you. When they're eating that steak, they'll remember that you were on the farm or you went to a CSA or you did something. You have connection there. So make those connections. That's what it's all about in life, those connections. That's how you get remembered.
Love that, man. That's awesome. Building memories, making memories with your kid, and in turn, they're getting educated, right, through application, all that.
Yes.
Bro, I want to hit you with the last question, man.
Sure.
Going back to the family man aspect, right, the family leader aspect. If you had to narrow it down to just a few traits, in your opinion, what makes a dad a great family leader?
What makes a dad a great family leader? It's such a multifaceted question. I would say, for starters, being egoless. So being a great, and what do we say in Apogee? Forever learner, right? There's never a time that you top yourself. You're just constantly growing. So being able at any time to just keep growing and learning and being a part of your family. So what makes you a great leader? You're being patient. You're being calm, you're being understanding, you're being empathetic, and you're growing. Because who you are as a dad and father when they're 1 and who you are as a dad and father at 10, you can look back and I can say, I was 25, 24 when I had my kid. Who I am now compared to who I was then, night and day. In Apogee, we always say, I'm not age 37, I'm level 37, right? I took that from a couple of weeks ago and I said, that hit. Because it's like for every year, you just gain so much. Or you lose so much because you don't appreciate that time. You can spend flicking on social media or doing dumb stuff or spending dumb time with dumb friends. But if you stay focused and driven and you stay connected to your family, you're constantly growing, leveling up, And I think that's the big thing. What makes you a great, husband and leader in your family is being connected to them, being present, constantly growing with them and helping them along that journey. Because they need it too. You have more experiences. So you got to be there. You got to be everything, as a dad. You really do. You have to be everything. You have to be their security. You have to be, their shoulder to cry on when things are tough. You have to be the guy who's watching over their shoulder when they may not think about it. You have to be a jack of all. You have to be a Swiss Army knife is what you have to be. And you have to be sharp at all times. And so as a dad, you got to take the time to yourself to assess your weaknesses, because you got to strengthen those soft spots, because at any moment life can attack one of those soft spots. And if you're not ready, you're not going to be able to help your family when they need it most.
Continual growth, man, and bringing them along for that growth. That's what it is, man. I
100%.
appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate
Dude,
you too.
Thank you, man. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story, and also just pouring into these guys, man. And hopefully all these kind of lessons that Matt has shared with you guys, man, can serve you in some way or form, because that's what we're about. That's what's nice about having good men that you can rely on, because they will give you wisdom from mistakes or from experiences that they've had in their life. And if we can extract those lessons and apply them where they're applicable in our own lives, man, like, it's going to change the course for us. For sure.
Tenfold. And use that pain for purpose. Don't use it as weakness. Don't be anchored by it. Use all those experiences to grow from. And man, I appreciate you. I appreciate you for having me, for sure.
Yes, sir. We'll do it again, brother.
All right, G, let's do it.
Thank you for checking out my conversation with Matt Konway. I've linked all of his contact info in the show notes below. Like always, if you got value from this episode, please share it with another dad who could benefit from it. All right, my fellow alpha dad, I'll catch you on the next one.
1, 2, 3 actions I didn't meet. 4, 5, 6 fear and silence begin to mix. 7, 8, 9 the thought of being emotionless started taking over